Good morning, Dojo. Let's get our viewer arena open on YouTube as well. Okay, we got all our chat rooms open. Got the kiddos with me for a few minutes here. So we've got our normal weekend tournaments. They are arenas. They are 15 plus 5 time control, 15 minutes, 5-second increment. They are starting at our normal time of 9:30 a.m. Pacific in 19 minutes from now. And there will be 3-hour-long arenas as every week. We'll watch some of the games. The arenas are not FIDE rated, no. You would have to have tournament directors and proctors and things to play FIDE rated tournaments online.
Daddy,
Oui.
what am I gonna do?
Je sais pas. Tu vas observer le programme ou tu vas aller lire un livre ou jouer un jeu? Est-ce que tu as vu ce que ta grande sœur a construit pour ta petite sœur dans la salle à manger? Tu pourrais grimper dessus, ça pourrait être un bon bateau pour toi. Moana a un bateau aussi, c'est vrai.
Yeah.
Toi, tu veux voir Moana? Moana, elle fait pas partie de ce programme d'échecs ici. On peut pas en ce moment. Quoi? Ah oui, tu as déjà dit ça et je t'ai dit que on va pas voir Moana maintenant, ok? Tu l'as déjà vu ce matin? Tu l'as déjà vu, Moana, aujourd'hui. Maintenant, fais autre chose. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. Aïe, aïe, aïe. All right, so maybe let's put a puzzle up for folks to warm up on while we're waiting here. Where did I have my... Looks like I may have closed them yesterday. Okay, there we go. All right. Give you something a little tricky today. A new position. Okay, switch it. And this one's going to be white to move, so let me just switch what it says here. White's move. Okay, so here's a little puzzle. White's move. Something to rev up our brains before our games start. Hey, Falgry. Oui. Mais qu'est-ce que tu dis là? Ah oui? Ah, ok. Je savais pas. Hop, 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 hop. Whoa, 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 whoa. Qu'est-ce que tu veux voir là? Oh, tu vas essayer de voir les oiseaux et les écureuils. Voilà. Bonne idée. Bonne chance. Looking at this puzzle, my mind is going to variations that I didn't think of the last time I looked at it. So I'm trying to think how I would play those positions. Let's see, I go there, there, there. Oui! T'as vu des animaux ou pas? T'as vu un écureuil aujourd'hui? Poumf! Écroulé. Oui? You're welcome? Oh, tu veux que moi je vienne regarder avec toi? Ben moi je dois faire le programme là. Hey Stan, yeah, it has been. How are you? Quoi? J'ai pas compris, qu'est-ce que tu veux? Tu veux que moi je vienne à toi? Mais moi je dois faire ce programme ici, chérie. I'm having trouble calculating this position. Is this even the right one? Whoa! Ça va, chouchou? Maybe I'm a little distracted. Right. Mm-hmm. No sweat work. That's okay. I haven't really done any sweat work for a week or two. It comes and goes with the periods of one's life and one's other commitments. C'est pas si grave, chérie. For anyone over on YouTube wondering how to get into the tournaments, I'll show you because you guys don't have that exclam play command. So here are the Saturday Rapid tournaments. This is the Chess Dojo Club on chess.com. That's how you would find them from YouTube. I knew that Dubov and Hans were playing a blitz match yesterday and today because they were both in Moscow for Aeroflot Open, I guess, right? And I don't know. I didn't know the result, but Ranga is telling me that Duov won by 1 game in the final game of the match, maybe?
Daddy.
Oui, je suis là, chérie.
Come, Daddy. Come, Dad. Come, Dad. Come, Dad.
Tu peux rester ici avec moi, mais tu peux pas écouter moi en ce moment, chérie.
I want Daddy.
Tu as d'aller, tu es sur ton papa en ce moment. En ce moment même.
Daddy.
Qu'est-ce que tu veux?
I want Daddy.
Oui, je suis là avec toi. So Ranga, do you also know the result of the polygraph, or has that not happened yet? Oui, les doigts. The result is not in the polygraph, is tomorrow. Give Hans time to prepare himself to lie properly under polygraph. I definitely don't know how polygraphs work, man, with head of dog. But I haven't tried to understand. I haven't read anything online or anything. So I do not know the barest of things about polygraphs. Hi Jay, welcome back. Today we have a rapid tournament, 15-minute plus 5-second time control.
Daddy,
Oui.
I want to eat.
Tu veux manger plus? Vraiment? T'avais déjà mangé un grand petit déj aujourd'hui, non?
Egg. I'll eat.
T'as encore faim. I don't know, Thurston. In this case, it's a Russian who's asking for a polygraph from an American. So it doesn't necessarily reflect an American love of polygraphs. I was told yesterday that I had an American view of football, which I don't even know what that is, because I never really talked to other Americans about football. But insofar as I'm somewhat American, I have no love of or knowledge or relationship to polygraph testing. Don't know anything about it. By the way, our tournament starts in 6 minutes. 6 minutes. General Blorp, are you asking about like coffee places? I don't drink coffee. So if that's a coffee question, I know nothing about it. If it's something else, I also don't know about it.
Oh, dinner.
Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Dinner.
Tu veux manger plus? Bah, peut-être que tu peux demander à ta maman si tu veux.
Okay.
Jay, if somebody's rating goes up or down during a tournament, they stay in the section they're in. Generally, they keep playing the tournament.
Did the dog get a walk?
Nope.
Oh my god, okay. Did Celine get her diaper changed?
Nope. Nothing's happened. Is somebody in the wrong division, maybe? Let's see. 1700 plus. Copy link. Have a look. Who's in it? Oh, yeah, the Gray Muse. The Gray Muse, if you can hear me, you might be in the wrong section. You're in the 1700 plus group. You might want the under 1300 group. I'm not playing myself, Rodrigo. I'm commenting. So I'm going to watch the games that people play and then make hopefully useful comments about what they're up to. Here's the under 1300 tournament. The under 1300 tournament has Daniil Dubov in it. Speak of the devil. Yeah, this tournament looks like a better tournament for you, Gray Muse. The under 1300 arena has got a bunch of people close to you in rating, and it's got a bunch of people, so it's more likely to actually happen. The over 1700 tournament looks like it won't be happening today. Welcome to the tournament, Elliot Maximus. Awesome. Let's check out the middle group. Tournament starts in 3 to 4 minutes at this point. All right. Happy to see that this week DJ Creech has opponents. Yes. Should you resign in a win? No, Jay. Resigning in a win is cheating. You should not cheat. Okay. So, for anyone wondering, the 13 to 1700 section looks like it is happening. The under 1300 section is happening. The over 1700 section is still needing a couple more players. You didn't know that resigning in a winning position is cheating? Yeah, it's called, throwing? I don't know if that's the technical term for it, but throwing a game is cheating. Yeah. You're supposed to play, I don't know, normally or for really in your games or something. For something that's a rule, I'm not coming up with very legal words for it. But sandbagging is a word for losing in order to purposely lower your rating, I think, right? Sandbagging is to lower your own rating on purpose. It could be for a nefarious purpose, such as to enter a weaker tournament. And then throwing is correct, right? From I think throwing means what I'm saying it means. I just feel like there should be a more legalistic or technical word for it as well. But yeah, I mean, as Blorp says, the basic idea is that there's always supposed to be good faith competition, right? You're supposed to be able to assume that your opponents are playing fairly against you and that other people in the event are also playing opponents who are playing fairly against them. You see what I mean? Like, you want to think that everyone is facing a similar fairness of competition. Because if somebody plays for real against you, but then loses on purpose against your opponent, against other people in your tournament, those people will win the tournament ahead of you. And that's sort of breaking the rules of competition. And the spirit of it as well. I haven't seen it yet, Jay. I've pretty much went to sleep after last night's stream. got up this morning, spent an hour with the kids, and turned on the stream here. So I will probably not get to see your study that you sent me until Monday when the kids go to school. Right, there were the baseball players who like bet against their own team to make money, right? I live in the US actually, Jay. Okay, games are starting in about 30 seconds or so. So quick little tidbits of announcements or advice for those who are going to participate in the games. One thing is during your games, you should not listen to or watch the stream. You should either mute it or close it while you play and just focus on your game. It could be cheating to listen to the commentary while playing, since we mentioned the word cheating today already. Also, in general, it's best to just focus on what you are doing. So with that said, have fun, everybody. Games are kicking off, and I wish you all a fun time. All right, Russian defense from Mahim the Goat. So knight f3, knight f6, also called the Petrov defense. Knight takes e5, knight e4, copycat variation. Bishop c4, threatening f7. Black quickly plays queen e7. Wow. I thought this looked like a great move for black. d5, blocking the bishop from f7. Opening up this piece for development, threatening to capture a piece, so white has to lose time. This looked like a great move, and in 1 second, black says, I'm sure I've calculated whatever could happen on f7. And they just go forward like this. Goodness. You didn't get paired yet, Stan? Bishop f7 check, king d8, queen h5, d6, knight g6. Wow. It is complicated here. Oh my gosh, Mahim's talking to us during the game. Mahim! You're not allowed to watch the commentary while you're playing your game. Come on, Mahim. We just talked about how it was cheating on the stream that you were listening to. Bye. All right, let's check out this game over here. Okay. French defense, right, folks? French defense. The bishop says it's willing to trade for the knight in order to help black win the battle over this central square, e4. White advances the pawn, saying, okay, you got me. I can't hold the e4 square with my pieces anymore. I will advance and take space. Black immediately tries to undermine the center, and white says, yeah, but with the bishop here, I grab the dark square bishop, reinforce my center. Beautiful position for white with the bishop pair and the center. Knight e7, h4, knight c6, rook h3. No, h5 first. Queen a5. Rook h3. Oops. Playing all these moves in seconds. Bishop d2, knight moves away, g4. Why did the knight go to f5 instead of c6, where it would attack the center pawn? Gets kicked. Wow. Bizarre. Bizarre start to this game. I think that white might want to leave the pawn on g4 and knight on h6 here. But a very weird start, just playing way, way, way too fast. I mean, after queen a5, black's even making direct threats, and white just continues blitzing here. Normally in this position, you'd play the move bishop d2, defending this pawn and defending this pawn because now you can recapture. Or at least normally you would think for a moment about what you were going to do. Now, it's a complicated situation. Complicated situation. There's a part of me that wants to play c4 here as white and use these doubled pawns to try and open up the center a little bit, since the knight's going to be bad on h6. Might be nice to open some other part of the board. There's another part of me that wants to develop a piece at some point. We have to keep this pawn defended, because if we ever go g5, the knight comes back, right? And to keep this defended, well, we can't be playing moves like knight f3, right? Unfortunately. So it feels a little bit bizarre how or awkward to even develop these pieces. But, you know, we could play c4 and ignore it for a little bit and continue on with this. Fixing. Yeah. Right. Fixing is when you sort of agree to some kind of match result. Thank you, FB. There we go. Hello, hello, Leviathan. So Renga saying he's been watching some really strong grandmasters playing rapid chess, and even they will stop and take 2 minutes on some move in the opening when the action gets started. Now, white played a4. Okay. Not super sure what that's about. Maybe white didn't want black putting the queen on that square after something like c4. Queen here. I had considered this move. You know, attacking these squares here. Possible move for black. I imagine white can probably handle it. I probably wouldn't spend a whole tempo on a4 to prevent it here, but I think that might be what's going on. Black develops the bishop. Probably wants to castle to the queen side, if I had to guess. But also, you know, maybe bring the bishop here, since you can always open the diagonal with d4. And your bishop will be amazing if white tries c4. So, in general, this piece might be heading here, and the king this way. Looks pretty nice for black. The only other thing I would say is, you know, the move just queen c7 or something. Just attack this pawn at some point. I'd love to see how white plans to defend it. Maybe rook e3, weirdly. But this position here has this feature that lots of awkward pieces for both sides and little tactical details can decide what is or is not a good move. So, for example, let's say we play queen c7 as black. White wants to defend this pawn without hanging the g-pawn, right? So let's say white plays rook e3. If you want to play this move, you actually have to calculate d4, which normally not necessarily a move black wants to play here, trading one of these doubled pawns. Moi, je ne sais pas non plus. But the idea is, you know, if the rook dropped back, say, to e2 at some point, then we'd be hanging this pawn, right? So, you know, white would have to make sure, is the rook okay on e4 in this position? I think this time it is, but just an unusual square. Alternatively, if rook e3 wasn't good, white maybe would have to play f4. Which is possible, I guess. Not super desirable, but possible. All right, I think we've had another move already. Bishop e2, overprotecting g4. So white wants to keep the knight stuck over here, kind of like I was thinking. Queen c7. Now white has to figure out how to defend this pawn. Still, knight f3, knight g4 looks like a mistake, right? Rook e3, the rook might now run out of territory. Something like this, right? And then it has to go here, and black could get this pawn here. Okay, not entirely clear who that's good or bad for, honestly, but white chose to now play f4, just grabbing and supporting that space. Oh, speaking of not going as expected, Lucas, I thought black's king was headed towards the queen side here, and now he castles king side. Huh. Oui.
I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to do.
Ok, alors ne fais rien.
But I don't want to do nothing.
Okay.
There's no books I want to read either.
Aucun livre parmi tous les livres dans ta chambre?
Well, I want to read one, but I just don't find it.
Est-ce que c'est Eva et Sophie?
No. I know what that is.
Ok.
But it's Pokemon number 2.
La série bleu et rouge?
I don't know what we're talking about.
Your opponent was playing moves in less than 1 second. Wow. That can't be too good. Let me see if I can find his book for him and come right back, okay? Okay. Oui, c'est dans la même série que rouge et bleu, n'est-ce pas? C'est dans la même série que rouge et bleu, non? Le Diamond et Pearl. Ay, ay, ay. It's hard to keep up with the books for him. Ugh. Okay. Castle's kingside. Rook g3. That's what I was thinking of. Rook e8. Black's got a million cramped pieces coiled to respond if white does anything. Knight f3, knight c6, g5, knight f5, rook g1. And black opens up in the center a little bit with knight e3 to follow. Well, other than hanging that pawn in the opening while blitzing, white has played all good moves since. Definitely risky statement. I just assumed that black was headed the other way. It's not terrible to go this way, though. It's just, you know, not my instinct to castle towards white's strength. So if black goes knight e3, maybe white plays queen e2 instead of taking it. Like knight e3, queen e2. c4. That seems risky. This bishop's not that good, and the light scores are all weak. That seems bad for white. Yeah. Bishop e4, just find another square, yeah. And then white's okay. Okay, so Merles plays g6. Wow. That move I would have never guessed either. It allows white to open the H file with this trade at some point, including at this point. It gives up on playing f6, and perhaps most dangerously, knight h2 to g4. Better have a plan against knight h2. Probably Merles will just sack on e5 or something. White plays c4, keeping the center more closed, hanging onto those doubled pawns. That's weird. Okay, what if we go here? What would black do? Knight e5, takes, queen here defends that knight. I don't know, looks pretty decent for white, knight h2. Anyway, not the way the game went. c4 knight here. So black is preparing bishop here. There goes the knight. Well, now I'll find out what these two players think about knight h2, knight g4, because it happens one move later. Looks really terrifying for black. It is true that, as Hockey Chess Dude says, Merles appears to be favored by the gods. I mean, that's, you know, whoever would be the highest rated player in the tournaments would tend to appear that way, I think. Rook d8. So now knight f6 won't win the rook. Knight f6 will still be a pretty good move. King here. Now, I was going to say rook h1 would be a pretty obvious move, but there is the bishop here. So we'll have to exercise some caution. Maybe queen g4 to h3 could be a plan, or queen e2 to h2. Queen g4 it is. So here's my first thought as white. I bring the queen here, threatening hg, queen h7, checkmate. When my queen's on h3, black plays rook h8 to defend h7. Then I play h6 check, forcing the king to f8, and trapping the rook on h8, and then I just go play somewhere else, right? Okay, black already plays rook h8, so they're on the same page with us. I guess there's some small chance that black can just keep the position locked and... I guess another interesting question was, what about this move, knight to g8 here? Trying to get this knight out. And I suppose white could play queen h3. And then you no longer have rook h8 to stop this. And trading the knight doesn't actually help much, huh? And eventually rook h1 and hg. Bishop can take the rook, and white doesn't care. Yeah. Okay, so rook h8 makes sense. King f2, connecting the rooks. King f8, running away from that area. There was a good question from Ash earlier. How should white protect the king, or just trade to the endgame and push kingside pawns? So white's idea is that they're protecting the king by crushing all the black pieces. In other words, if you keep all the black pieces not active and not good, then they can't get at your king no matter where he dangles. Queen h3, threatening maybe h takes g6 since the rook isn't defended. And black plays b6, allowing both a5 to develop the rooks and open up another area of the board, which is definitely what I want to do. Or h takes g6, when black will have to take with the pawn or the knight. So tempting. I don't know what rook g4 is about. That's a mysterious move to me. This move looks great. But great as it looks a tiny bit murky as well. So my instinct would be to open up this and bring this rook over here. That seems like everything I ever wanted. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Yes, the problem, as Rangos says, is that eventually something will happen. Things will open up on the board, and the king will still be in the middle. And Merles will find some kind of tactical chances, no matter how bad the position is, at some point when you open it. But I still personally just have to tell you guys, I believe in the move a5. I believe in a move a5. Because this rook can't get to the open files we create on the queen side. And personally, I don't see any need or reason for Merles to have pushed this pawn. I would just keep it back on b7. The pawn and bishop are defending each other. And I would just keep waiting around from black's side of this. But black is a little low on moves. I mean, they're almost Zugzwang, It could be the equivalent of going queen b8, queen c7. Here. Okay, rook g4, we don't know what it's about. Bishop a8, just waiting. And now white chooses not to take here because the knight would be lost on that square. But we don't know why white now traded and retreated. Not really sure what the advantage was. Basically, you only want to make that trade once it accomplishes something. So we can say this move was definitely a mistake from white, even without seeing anything more, because white made the trade and then ran away from it. Yeah. And rook's just sort of, I don't know what it's doing, but there doesn't seem to be a follow-up. We're trading and retreating. This gives black's king a very important extra square connecting the rooks. That's a really big deal. Black is so low on squares that giving them an extra square, huge, huge mistake from white. Yeah, white doesn't seem to be sure what to do, Hockey Chess Dude. And white is down to 3 minutes, and it is a very difficult position. But if you don't know what to do in a position like this as white, after rook g4, bishop a8, just play rook g1. Your opponent's just shuffling their bishop through b7, a8, c6, etc., right? So just shuffle yourself as well. But don't make committal moves that you don't have a follow-up to. Ash is in agreement with me saying a5 is very strong, but h takes g can backfire. Yep. There we see the black king. Not only it has f7, it also has g7 now because there's no longer the h5 pawn that can always come here. Looks like white maybe put the knight on e4 in order to put this rook on h1 safely. Let's see if that is the follow-up. Yeah, it is. Wow. And look, Blunderfest, very bold. Now that you've given him connected rooks, he says, I'm going to open up the h-file and take over. Yeah. Hopefully you'll get another game, Hyper. And as far as I can tell, there's just nothing good about white's position anymore. Black's just unwinding all their pieces. This is well placed, this is well placed, and the last rook's about to be well placed. Black is in commanding position now, commanding. And pretty much h takes g6 is like the 99% culprit for white's transition from a really great position to a really awful position. And I don't really see any remedies. I mean, with the queen on g2, we can't even ever move this knight. There's not really much to do. Like maybe with the queen on g1, you could try to land some kind of knight d6 thing with some pressure against g6, maybe as something desperate to try. Like if white were Merles, you know, and they were trying to cook something up. But queen g2, queen c6. Black might just be eyeing the pawn. Sheargrove says the idea to not trade when you have more space might even include pawns, right? Yeah. Now, of course, to eventually win a game, you have to trade pawns or pieces. You have to do something. But you do that once you've built up enough of an advantage that you're making a concrete improvement to your position. You don't do it if there's no reason. Hey, Asanda. The games are played on chess.com, so they're rated on chess.com, but they're not rated in any, you know, over-the-board federation or anything. They're not rated in FIDE or USCF. Queen goes to a4, even though the pawn has escaped the square. White trades the isolated a pawn versus losing it, so that much was good for JK. Minute and a half to 5 minutes 47. Queen g1. Yep, that's where the queen should be. This creates possibilities of knight g5, knight d6, knight f6. I mean, you at least want your pieces to be able to move. That's generally always to your benefit, to be able to move them. Trades and takes a pawn from you. Ay. And without the knight, white's position is less dynamic, right? The bishops are kind of straightforward pieces. The knights are the surprising hoppers. And now black is up 2 pawns, so I guess their main plan will be to advance the pawn majority here and open up the white king from this side eventually, right? Like queen a2, c4, d3 kind of moves. Rook check? What? That pawn looks defended. Queen g5, looking to land one check here on f6. Rook f8 could be played if black cares. I think they could also allow it. And just play rook h2 check. Go after white's king. Yep, that was the rook that that white sacrificed for very little. For very little. But desperation was just setting in. I think white didn't see any ideas, and they were down 2 pawns, so they felt the need to try and... They felt sort of a desperation to find something versus just sitting around waiting for black to figure out how to use the 2 pawns. Rook h2. Yep, rook h2. So now the idea is that against king g1, we want to take, allow the check, and just come here. Oh, white's simply resigned after rook h2, it looks like. So the idea was king g1, rook takes, check, king here, and this knight is covering all 3 of these checks for the white queen. When it comes here, we can come here. And when it comes here, we can come here. And she doesn't have access to f6 anymore. So the black king just kind of walks around the knight in a little shape and escapes the queen. Knights can provide very good cover for a king by blocking checks in one direction while attacking a bunch of the squares that you would use for diagonal checks. So yeah. Black comes out winning. And hopefully we all learned one lesson here to really hold back on this move. Only do it when you've got a plan. Only do it when there's a follow-up. All right, let's go to our under 1300 arena and grab a game from there. All right, 2 players rated exactly the same, to the point. 1,061, 1,061. Let's see how they got to this position, shall we, folks? We're pretty early in the opening, move 7 or 8. Pieces are coming out, but there are already a few gaps in the pawn structure. Let's see what the opening was. C takes d4, c3. A gambit. A Smith-Morra gambit against the Sicilian. So white gives up a pawn in the middle of the board. What for? A little bit of pressure on these open files. You know, one tempo of development since black spent time capturing the pawn. Queen a5. Black starts out with the queen. Bishop c4. b5. Wow. Wild stuff. I want to show a strange move here. Just an example of board vision. The move white played in the game was bishop takes b5, defended by the knight. Pretty simple, pretty good. Also, pretty fine and simple would be to just drop the bishop back if we wanted to keep that kind of aggressive diagonal and pressure there with the bishop. But there's a funny sort of what should I say, feature of the position, which is this 5th rank being totally open and black not having put any pawns in the center or brought out the knight, which allows white to play moves like queen d5 and queen h5. And from either move, funnily enough, the queen would keep this pawn from capturing the bishop because of queen takes queen. And from either square, the queen's also going to threaten checkmate and trap the pawn on b5. So if white played something like queen d5, I think they would more or less immediately win the game.
I'm not going to get bogged down in hundreds of variations, but one example would be black plays e6 to stop queen f7. We would take the rook. Black could take one bishop if they want, but we take a knight, and white has just collected way too much material. Black is just dying. I've never played it myself, man, with head of dog, no, but it's what this reminded me of. So more or less, I think the move queen d5 would win. I suppose black could play knight c6 to protect the rook, and another branch would look like this. Right? And I would say in this position, white is pretty much equally winning to the last one we saw. They could play bishop takes g8 now, or they could play this move, queen g7, pawn takes bishop, queen h8. Right? So, yeah, the opening that this reminded me of, folks, goes like this. Is it this one, man, with head of dog? It's something like this, right? Called the Brian counter gambit. That's what I was referring to. As soon as I saw the b5 move, it made me think of this. This line, I think, is terrible for black. They also have this move in the Evans, right? The immortal game has b5 here in the King's Gambit, and the Evergreen has b5 in against the Evans Gambit. Something like this. Just to get this bishop out. Yeah, it was Dufresne or Dufresne or something who played this as black against the great Adolf Anderson. Okay, back to our contestants here. So black played this b5 weird gambit that could have died to queen d5 or queen h5. Now, why is black potentially lost on move 6 in this game? Why? Well, they haven't developed a single minor piece or put a single pawn in the center. So they've left all the central squares available to white's pieces, right? That's a big deal when you don't control a single square in the center a single time. Look, black doesn't have a single piece attacking d5, d4, e5, or e4. That's kind of like a weird anti-accomplishment itself, right? To play 5 or 6 moves of a game and manage to not have a single piece attacking a single square in the center. So, yeah, that's going to open you up to the fact that white's got all kinds of possibilities, right? Because you're not controlling any of the squares they might want to use. And the queen can only hit spots as diverse as f7 and a8 if you're giving her uncontested access to the whole center. Right? Okay, so white played the move that was right in front of their face. They took the pawn dangling right here in the bishop's nose. Black plays e5 and now controls one central square, right? White brings the bishop back to task. I mean, okay, so it's one thing to be obsessed with attacking f7 with your bishop. It's another to make use of it, right? If you're going to put your bishop on c4, then you should be playing queen d5 at the right moment. Otherwise, why put your bishop here? Oh, white's bishops are looking very good here. Side by side. If you lay out like the squares that these pieces cover, it's just like, yeah, they're just carpet bombing this area. Oof. Merle says e5, there was again queen d5. Yep, just winning the game on the spot. Game over again. Basically, folks, the rook is trapped by the queen, right? Even without a second threat over here. The only way to protect the rook was knight c6, but then after white takes it, the queen's hanging. So black has no time to recapture the piece, right? They would have to do something with their queen, such as this, and then the bishop escapes, and white's won the game. Well, Shirogorov, knight d5's been illegal this whole time. That's why I didn't bring it up. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so the bishops come out. Ooh! Now Jedi's doing some stuff. Now the white king can't castle. Knight e2, good choice of development squares. Now should white castle or defend this pawn, huh? How do we feel here, folks? Neither. That's odd. Oh, white wants to do the same thing that black's doing. White wants to play here and take over this diagonal. That makes plenty sense. Uh-oh. Then they leave the bishop here. The point is to do this, no? And then maybe we'll get another shot at queen d5. Oh, no, queen f2 mate. Sorry. Changed plans because of checkmate. So this was white's original plan, but they noticed that black had a threat, and they revised their plan. That was a good idea to revise that plan. Man, oh man. Takes. Whoa. Oh, now we're getting fancy. Hey, black was ready for the fancy party. Right on, 92. We got an exclam on the board, folks. Knight e2, beautiful in-between move. Instead of playing some move to defend f7 or a8, we save the knight from this pawn, and the point is if the queen takes, she undoes both of her threats, and black can do whatever they want, castle, d5, whatever. And if white leaves the knight here and moves the king away, then the knight's not on a square dangling from the pawn anymore. So that means like king here, you know, there's knight d4, there's knight f4, but also after castles, you can't just pick up that knight here. Again, you'd have to play a retreating move or get into these complications here. And these complications, white might be ahead if the knight were still on c3 hanging to a pawn, right? Like you maybe get your queen out, they take here, and then you take the knight on c3, winning. Well, now there is queen e8 winning, huh? Queen c6. Complicated long variation. However long it goes, this move here was brilliant, for sure. White took it in the game, and black got developed. Beautiful, free tempo. Black got too excited. Now they're playing with too much fire, I think. Knight d4 feels like too much fire. Your f7's undefended, your queen's attacked, you haven't yet castled. This feels like too much fire. Somebody got overexcited. Like, what's the plan against, I don't know, queen h5 or something? Queen e4 played in the game. So now the queen's attacked and the rook's attacked, which would, in fact, win both rooks, right? Be like the 0-1, take my rooks book. Bishop f7, I was looking at 2 ash. It's interesting. I think bishop f7, king f7, queen h5, g6. It's not immediately clear how white makes something out of these tactics, and we've just sacked a piece. Similarly, I think my queen h5 move is not as good as Berkucci's move because g6, and we're still wandering around looking for the threat that's going to help us. We need a double threat to totally win this thing, right? You know, we could potentially do this now because knight takes is no longer check on the queen. This is partly what I was thinking, was to get something like this. Okay, perfectly fine position for white, but I think the move that Berkucciy found, first blush, this looks like a knockout. Right, first blush, this looks like a knockout, and the game ended one move later, folks. So queen e4 attacking the rook and attacking the queen. If the queen moves, she needs to defend that rook, but she's got no way to get to b8 or d8 here, right? You could throw a knight e2 again, and white would just take it, which is fine with white. Black played d5, the only move that saves the rook and queen. Nicely found in that sense. And if rook takes, pawn takes, the game goes on. And after bishop takes, maybe white still just wins. But at least this was a good move to try. And I recommend to everybody, if you're in this position in a game, play d5 instead of resigning. It gives you a shot, right? there's some percentage of people who will trade queens, or, you know, queen d5 maybe is another way you can get out. Maybe you'll even win the game. Who knows? I guess I should go rook d8 here instead of knight e2. Okay. Anyway. So definitely play d5 before resigning. After queen e5, you could consider resigning here if you want. You can also keep playing with queen e7. We're definitely losing some stuff. But, yeah. Oof. So black went from playing a brilliancy to playing a blunder from one move to the next pretty much, and went from winning, or from a good position to a loss in just as much time. This move was wonderful. After queen takes, knight c6, black has kind of saved themselves, and now I guess, you know, queen e7 and castling looks normal. But they threw another aggressive move. They were feeling it, you know. They were excited, feeling it. Like they played a great move, so they want to come with the next great move, right? You want to throw more and more oil on the fire. But this rook's hanging. This king needs to get castled. This rook needs to get out. You just can't beat the tar out of white with these two pieces when white's army is more fully mobilized and coordinated, right? So this was a thing where, you know, we could fault black for calculation. You could say, oh, did you see this move? Did you see that move? No, like, I think it's what you want is a reality check. Your position is not strong enough to be throwing unnecessary tactics. Knight e2 was necessary. It was a saving move. It was a defensive move under fire, under heavy fire. So it was a great move in that sense. But you still need to understand you're the person struggling to get castled. You're the person who's up a pawn, but way down in development, like 2 to 3 moves down in development. So your goal here is to catch up in development, to play passive moves to some extent, to defend, right? But black's like just feeling it, so they want to play another brilliancy, and that gets them killed. Okay, and that said, folks, in general, you should try to play brilliancies. You'll learn more if you try to play tactical chess and try to play brilliancies and try to sock it to your opponent when you see a move that looks good to you, than by saying, well, I'm probably missing something, it looks risky, you know, I'm not a GM, I can't play brilliant moves. That way you will get better much slower. So you should go for things if you think they look good, even though, you know, it's going to cost you some points here and there. Okay. We're going to look for another game here. So now we turn our attention to the 13 to 1700 arena for a moment. Grab that link, throw it in here. We're going to check out DJ Creech's game because DJ Creech last week was waiting in the 13 to 1700 section and there weren't enough opponents. And the 13 to 1700, if I remember correctly, got canceled last week, and we only had the under 1300 and the over 1700. So, DJ Creech came back this week anyway, and it's great to see that they've got a match, and we're going to check it out. So, this position here, immediately, a very interesting position to think about and evaluate. White has the space advantage from the e5 pawn, and it's pretty well protected at the moment. Rook e1 can follow as well. And the black king is quite weak on the dark squares. But black has some stuff too. White's bishop is technically a bad bishop, right? It has somewhat limited options. This knight has pretty good maneuvering options. There are scenarios where it can outplay the bishop. And black does also have this half-open c-file with which to transfer pieces towards the king side, or to play against with b4 or d4 to open up counterplay on that file. So one of the most important questions would have been, what about knight c5 headed to e4? You know, can white play f3, or does it hurt them to do it? Right? Allowing black into squares like this. That was a very important question, was knight c5. Black went with queen c4, and we've got a pretty quick answer from white, rook e1, overprotecting the pawn and helping to coordinate these rooks. And now knight c5 comes in. Similar to last move, but with the queen in touch with some of these the squares as well. Looks very reasonable. You want a pawn endgame. All right, Ash. We'll let the players know. Dear players, Ash would like some of you to find your way into a pawn endgame. King and pawn endgame. That's the request. See what you all can do. Meanwhile, DJ, this is maybe the moment to stop and think for a minute. By which I mean literally a minute, maybe. It's not like a super critical game. It's not like the calculation that will decide winning or losing this game right here, but it's a relatively important move because we have to decide how we want to handle these ideas of knight d3 and knight e4. Oh, no, Sumner. I'm not saying people have to aim for crazy moves from the first move. They don't have to play crazy openings trying to turn every game into a tactical game. I just mean if you're playing along, playing however you normally play and whatever openings you're currently working on or enjoying or whatever it might be, when you see tactical moves that appeal to you, there are some players who shy away from those moves assuming that they're going to be wrong. They won't try out an in-between move. They won't try out a sacrifice because they don't have confidence or experience in their tactical abilities. But your tactical abilities will stay dull if you avoid all tactical lines. I did the opposite in most of my career, Sumner. I had no confidence in my endgames. So if I was 2 pawns up and saw a way to go into an endgame, I would avoid it out of lack of confidence of being able to convert endgames. And I would try and keep queens on the board and try to win in the middle game. So because of that, I just consistently did not get better at endgames, right? Because I was avoiding them, so I couldn't get better at them. So my neck's been bothering me for a couple days here. Bishop h6. All right, allowing knight e4, knight d3, whatever you want, and preparing to deliver some checkmates. Right? So the next ingredient is the queen coming here. I like this move, actually, DJ, and I didn't even see it. So I think you get a point ahead of me here, which is, like, I was thinking of putting the bishop on f6, so it's a little more versatile, covering a square from the rooks. And then aiming the queen here. But the fact is it takes 2 moves, and this takes 1 move, and that's a huge difference here, right? I mean, bishop here, knight here, it's a huge difference in that, you know, the piece might even get captured before it gets to f6. So this move looks much nicer. You just immediately get there, stop this pawn. There's back rank mates, depending how the game goes, if files open up in the middle of the board, and the plan of bringing the queen here. So, oh yeah, very nice move from DJ. And I said this was the moment to stop and think for white, not because the move is like a calculation that will win or lose immediately, but it's pretty important to figure out what to do. And DJ spent 2 minutes. I think that's perfect, 1 to 2 minutes here. You don't want to spend 5 or 6 minutes on a move that's not, you know, the game deciding calculation in a rapid game. Also, this advice depends on rating level, like how a 2200 or a 200 or an 800 or a 1200 should use their time, all varies. But for this level here, this 1600 level, 1 to 2 minutes on an important non-tactical move is about reasonable for this rapid time control. And found a great move. So bishop h6, queen comes to d3. She's planning, I think, to head to f5 to keep the white queen out of f6 in general. And so now white has to choose between rook e3 kind of stuff or queen h4. And the idea of queen h4, I think, would pretty much be that you want to follow up with g4. Trying to take away all the squares from this queen. And my calculation was queen f3, rook e3, and then white wins. But I didn't yet look really hard for alternatives for black. Merle's also saying black might lose instantly if they get the wrong move here. Yeah, so this might be a moment where black has to calculate pretty carefully. They spent 2 minutes on queen d3, which is reasonable. White chose queen f4, which seems like queen f5 will be fine here. Against queen h4, I didn't really see what black was going to do other than maybe retreating knight d7, which will stop mate for now, but leave black passive, right? That a lot of that counterplay is gone. Not the end of the world, maybe. I mean, you play rook c4 at some point. You could keep playing. Yeah. Maybe MPK. Maybe I could. We're going to watch a couple more moves of this game at least, see where it's headed. Open up MPK over here. And this last game with Baymon. I almost clicked on it to watch, you know, but then I was wanting to see DJ's game because of how DJ had waited for this tournament last week and then come back this week. So queen f5, that's the idea, yeah. And we simply get a trade into the endgame from DJ. Oh, that's a bit of a surprise. Black decisively trading quickly. If this move, I think black is maybe afraid of the rook coming here and bishop here to here. Could get pretty brutal. I mean, knight e4 does seem to defend, but there might be a really weird move here. Rook h3, preparing f3 without trapping the rook on the wrong side of the f-pawn. f3, knight moves, and then rook g3. Pretty scary for black. Yeah, pretty darn scary. Show you guys an idea. Here, here, check, here, here. I guess knight d7 stops checkmate. Against king here, there's check, you know. Okay, so maybe check here, 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 here is the most precise. Oh, no, wait, then there's king g8. Let me repeat positions once, and then go where I should have gone. Grab a pawn. Okay, the game goes on, but white has won a pawn. You know, that was all pretty scary. Went a little bit deep there, but just showing you that g takes f. Black avoided it very decisively here, but I think it's because they'd already prepared. They spent time on queen f5. Queen f5 was their obvious plan to stop queen f6 to g7. Why did black stop and think about queen f5? I think they were just double checking, like, yeah, if white trades queens, how am I taking back? And then we get this move really quickly. So that's good time usage from Jailer. Good alertness that white might go for the queen trade. Now white goes after the d-pawn. The knight could outplay the bishop in this endgame, but also black has to deal with the issue of the king. That the back rank mate, the box around the king could be an issue. White's bishop is not technically the good bishop because of the pawn structure for white being on dark squares, but it's not a terrible bishop either. So this endgame position is pretty double-edged and sharp at the moment. Black's going to defend the pawn this way. White could reposition the bishop to f6. Or play like f3 and start centralizing the king. Would make sense as well. Also, at some point, you could go h4, h5 for white. Looking to, again, gain space, open up. It opens up a lot of ideas. How do I explain the idea of playing a move that opens up ideas? So, I mean, the pawn on h5, if I played these arrows, you see, folks, like f3, king f2, h4, h5, what does it do? Well, one thing it does is it allows white to maybe play rook h1 and attack h7 or h8 with the rook. Another thing it does is you could reposition the bishop and then put the pawn on h6 and have a back rank mate where the pawn does the job and your bishop covers some other squares from f6 or e3. Another thing it does is, see how black's king is kind of boxed in? They might actually want to play f6 themselves to play king f7. And having your pawn on h5 putting pressure on g6 can discourage your opponent from successfully playing f6 or give you some kind of advantage when they do. Bishop g5 played. So the bishop repositions here. The black rook needs to keep the pawn defended, so it only had one square to go to, and that stops knight d7 from challenging this bishop once it's here. So perfectly reasonable reposition from DJ. Chad, do you prefer white or black in this endgame? Little evaluation question for all of us. Who would we rather play in this position? Oh, f3! So nice to see pristine positional moves. As Arate says, bishop e3 is a move to keep our eyes on as well, poking at the knight and pawn. For now, black has b6 in response, which doesn't look really bad for black. So I would not prioritize bishop e3 yet, but we should know that it's there. We should have our eye on it. I had noticed that much, Arate. I'd noticed bishop e3, b6, and that bishop e3 is like out there. Okay, we got a couple people preferring black, but it's close, they say. I prefer white. I think white's better because of the trouble with the king. Even though I think a lot of us have seen the knight outmaneuver the bishop a lot of times, I think this king position's a real problem. And I also like the idea of doubling rooks on the d file and going after this d5 pawn. I think that's going to be a little bit annoying for black as well. So sink the bishop on f6 more quickly. Good chap. Please sink that bishop. And then yeah, then we'll see what we can do with the rooks. How do we choose the 15+5 time control? Well, this time control was sort of chosen like 4 years ago, Ash. And then we've been pretty consistently keeping with it for a certain set of our events. Not all of our events. Obviously, a lot of what we do is truly classical in the dojo, like the Open Classical, like its name says, or the round robins, or the Friday night fights. Those are 3 events that are going on all the time that are truly classical chess. Bishop e3? No! No! Oh, my squares. Why is f3 a good positional move? Because it keeps this knight here out of e4. Like here, if you ever play bishop f6, black just plays knight e4, and then they can trade off that bishop or get it out of there. Also, at some point, knight e4 could leave your e5 pawn hanging. So f3 makes sure that they don't have knight e4, like ever. So your pawn will never be undefended for a moment. It also lets you start improving your king towards a pretty nice square, like d4 would be good for the king at some point, if at least one rook got traded. Okay, so to Ash's question. So, Ash, we wanted to be able to run like little tournaments, just like a drop of competition for people to sort of sharpen themselves by battling against each other in the dojo. And there's a certain feel to playing a tournament, but we wanted a tournament that would be done relatively quickly so people in different time zones could all participate from beginning to end, right? And so we came up with this time of like 9 in the morning or so in California, which is late enough that people on the West Coast can participate and be up and awake. And people as far away as India can still play at like 10 o'clock at night. So we miss, you're always going to miss some time zones. It's not good for people in Australia. But basically it works all the way to, Moscow and India and so forth. So it covers a good part of the world. And then, if you make it a 7-hour tournament, then of course it's going to be getting too late for a lot of people. So we started off by running basically 2-hour tournaments. 2 hours divided by 4 rounds, you want 30 minutes per game, so we wanted about a 15-minute game. But then we didn't want people flagging, and we've got a lot of new people always cycling through the Chess Dojo. And new people can't necessarily play a move in 1 or 2 seconds. They can't just play any random move. they sometimes need a little bit of time. So we put a 5-second increment to avoid people flagging. So that was where the 5 seconds came from. And it's been really good. Like we've kept using this time control a lot for years because it's been pretty good for us in that way, right? It is something which is a transitional time control between blitz players and classical players, right? Like it does get some people to slow down and think more about their games. You can actually play good moves in a rapid game. But also you can play several games, get more experience, get a whole tournament played in a couple hours. So it's worked well for us. Okay, this knight should have gone to e6 now to defend the f-pawn and chase the rook. But it went to h5 to defend this pawn. So this knight's now off to the side by choice. Let's see what white tries to do with the position. Tries to bring the bishop out to brighter pastures. Yeah, I was thinking also of like a king march. King here, king here, king here. Maybe chase the knight to g7, which would be a really bad square. And then win the f4 pawn that's already highlighted in red. That would be kind of my target here. Oh yeah, also an interesting move for white, as said by Merle, c4. That's a good thing about having the rook here. I thought of this move, and rook takes pawn, and then I kind of rejected this move. But yeah, I really wanted to attack this pawn. So this would do it. I feel stupid for not seeing this move, but one way or another, it's still still a very, very good move. c4, very nice. I would guess activating the king is moderately good as well. And time will tell whether this bishop maneuver here to h4 is very strong. We'll see. I mean, again, I do like the idea of improving our king a little bit. The knight is pretty stuck here, so white probably has some time to find an advantage. Like, they don't have to find c4 immediately to get the advantage. They've got, probably 2 to 3 moves of time with which to try to build an advantage while this knight's on h5. Rook a4 wandering off a little bit to the side, yeah. Just wandering off to the side, looking for something. White doesn't know exactly what they're looking for, but they've got less than a minute on the clock, so they're like, hey, is there anything over here, Just looking. But I think neither player has the instinct, just built into them where you don't have to think about it to just improve your king a little bit. That's just comes from playing a lot of endgames to just have some more of these, instincts. Instead, you see they're having to use their time, their thinking. But to play this endgame here, 30 seconds each, basically just off the 5-second increment without any instincts is tough, right? They're going to be... in their head, they're just swimming, right? You're trying to just calculate an endgame like this can't be done. You have to have instincts about where your pieces belong. I had not thought of that, Foos. Increasing the increment because other people aren't waiting on your round to finish. I understand that makes some sense. White better not sink the bishop on d6 because it'll just hang the bishop, but we might be in for a competition of who flags here. Seconds left. Oh, 0.3 seconds. Jailer repositions the bad knight. Good move. Now, Creech could grab this pawn or hang the bishop. I don't know what's on the agenda, folks. Hanging the bishop. Yep. Had a feeling. Does Jailer have time to take it? Flag. Yeah, so this time control, this 5 seconds, as you could see, 5 seconds is not a lot if the position's still a little bit difficult for the players. 5 seconds will help you out in something like king and queen against king, or king, rook, and pawn against king and rook, stuff like that, right? But with several pieces on the board, if you're not used to playing blitz, you can't do much with the 5-second increment. Absolutely, Vertwitch. So black flagged here, but they did have the opportunity also to maybe win the game here. For anyone who didn't see this tactic that I was referring to, I'll put it on the board so you can totally see it. So, yeah, rook takes d6 was a chance. As Merle says, you know, at some point when you're low on time, forget about finding best moves. You just need to keep the game going, right? So that means, like, in a position like this, you know, because like here, white thought for almost 30 seconds on bishop f2. 30 seconds out of the 50 that they had. So you're saying this is like, you know, more than half of your time should go into this very important move. No, I mean, you just need to be able to play things like king f2, king g7, rook d4, king g6, you know, rook d1. Like, you just have to be able to play little moves that aren't too bad in 1 or 2 seconds, you know, or 4 or 5 seconds. But trying to figure out, like, what's the best place to put this piece or that piece is just leads one into flagging here, yeah. Oh, and Jailer says they even tried to play rook takes d6, but flagged while putting the move in. So, yeah. Oh, interesting question about the final position from Nabucco, which I hadn't checked. The question is this pawn dangerous? So we were saying in the final position, Jailer could take this bishop and had seen it and was actually playing rook takes bishop when they flagged before the move was input. So if this weren't check, right, white could then play d7, and the rook can't get back to stop the pawn. So how dangerous is this pawn? Here the rook can't get back. There is knight e6, however, would probably be enough to save the position. But additionally, because this rook move is check, the rook can come back as well and then get here. So there's nothing dangerous about it. This here, if Jailer had taken the bishop, this is the kind of position that you're supposed to be able to win with the 5-second increment. It's one of the reasons we have the 5-second increment. So that if you play a good game and you're up a piece in the end game, you might not play perfectly, but you should be able to somehow muddle through and win this end game just off of, you know, a couple second instinctive moves, right? So they don't have to be the best move. They just have to be okay moves, and you're up a piece. So if you play them quickly, you know, maybe you get there. Evening, Skibix. And Jailer lost on time in both games. So this time control is just a little bit too fast for Jailer. Yeah. Which I can appreciate as somebody for whom things are increasingly getting too fast and too much. I also consistently asking the world to maybe slow down for me. All right, let's grab another under 1300 maybe. Let's check out a game of Emos, who is tied for first place with Hyper wins these. Oh, they're not playing each other. That's too bad. It would have been fun to see them playing each other. We've got a queen trapped in the corner here already in this game. Let's see how this happened, folks. I think this game might be about to conclude with a queen getting captured. So it's... Oh no, it's this stupid gambit. All right, white takes over the whole center. Black goes for checkmate on f2. White says no. Queen h3. Traps the queen. There's a free queen for white. Game over. So Emo is going to increase their score here, thanks to Black's bad gambit and weird queen sortie. That's right, Foos. Even Hikaru the speed demon. Time comes for everybody, right? I mean, that dude has such insanely fast board vision. But yeah, things eventually get too fast for everybody. I don't mean to be harsh towards Berkucci, by the way, folks, but I don't like this this gambit. think it might be from Eric Rosen that this thing somehow became popular. It's kind of like, instead of like an opening that's supposed to be good, it's like a meme opening or something. Like, I don't know. It's not good. Black shouldn't play it, and white immediately takes over this game very nicely. Bishop e2, preventing the, so to speak, knight g4 threat. And black just plays another move off to the side of the board, trying to set it up. And white says, yeah, if you play knight g4 now, I just block the bishop out, right? So now the white center improves from d3, e4 to d4, e5, kicks these pieces around. This guy's basically blocked out. So, yeah, nice play by white. And then this is just too much black continuing to pursue it. I feel like in this kind of position, you have to bust this piece back into the game, right? So you're looking at either c5, or if c5, d5 weren't good, and here I think it's fine because you can take here, but if c5, d5 were a problem, then you might play bishop e6 first, developing another piece, controlling the blockade square, and then let's say white castles or plays knight d2 or something. Now you try to bust this piece back in. I mean, you're down a pawn and white center is great, but you still want to play, but you still, you can still try to play, but you have to respect like what's happening on the board. Your piece has been blocked out. You're not up on development. You've got one knight against one bishop, so we can't really win with queen h4. All right, let's check out Hyper Wins These game. It looks like it finished. Ooh, possible endgame. Rook b8. So I think at the moment white's up one pawn after taking on b7. But there's an interesting question: how good or bad is this pawn on d3 going to be, right? Supported by the bishop, but far away from the c and e pawns. I would basically consider this an isolated passed pawn at the moment. Very interesting if this pawn's going to be a problem for white, or if white can round it up and capture it and go ahead 2 pawns instead of 1. Let's see how it goes. Black brings the rook out from the corner. That seems good. And makes moves like c5 and e5 stronger. White plays bishop a6, looking to get rid of that puppy. You got a sick puppy on your doorstep, and the bishop on a6 is going to take it to the vet. Yeah, to the vet. That looks pretty clean from Jimmy Lays. I don't really see a possible counter for black for the Jedi Goat. Don't see a way to save this. If I were playing this game as white or as black, the moves I'd be looking at would be e5 and c5. To my mind, white can ignore either move, not capture the pawn, but capture this one here. Because d4 is defended solidly enough, I think that should be okay. The other move I might throw in would be rook b7, which I think improves white's position. So like, let's say black plays e5. I could just take, or I could play this move first, right? I'm preventing this pawn from coming to c5 and battering my d4 square. And I'm saying that as long as d4 is solid, I can collect d3 next move. In the game, black has played c5. Okay, and white captures this pawn. Again, you can also throw in rook b7 checked first here as white, and then capture the pawn if you want to. I think either should be okay. Now, from black's perspective, you want to trade, and play e5. However, this should be refuted. The king is defending this bishop. If white goes after the king, kind of a remove the defender tactic, black will lose the bishop. Yeah, I don't even know, Foos. This is from, years ago that this gambit had its popularity, and people People came to me blaming Rosen for it, but I have not confirmed whether or not Rosen is to blame. All I know is that I did not favor people playing that opening. So when they came to me, I told them to stop. All right, white can solidly recapture. They can also consider this in-between move rook b7, which is quite strong here as well. But so here's what I'd calculated for white. If white wanted to get really fancy, here, check, here, here, winning a bishop. But this is a good example of how one can get too fancy, I guess, right? I calculated all this fancy thing for white, not taking back on d4, leaving all this happening. But takes, and if here, for example, then rook takes bishop check, and now we won't be able to get this one. So, you know, and here, this bishop can't take because it's pinned. Now, I think white can still just barely win with this very, very fancy variation. And then this king and pawn ending. Finally, we've got the king and pawn ending that somebody wanted. White can just barely win this, but I think we got to keep up with the game. And to me, that's actually a variation that says sometimes we can be too fancy and too precise with rook b7, and it's simpler to just recapture with the c-pawn here, which white did. Bishop takes, king takes. Now this way, white's up 2 pawns instead of 1. No weaknesses. Everything's very, very simple looking at the moment. Black plays e5 to try and give white an isolated pawn, which is a perfectly good try. This e6 pawn was a weak isolated pawn for black. Might as well try and trade it, but it doesn't hurt white's advantage at all. The king's in position to keep this pass pawn protected as it moves up the board, and the rook is active here on b5 or b7. So if I were white, I would activate the rook. White does. Trade, rook a8, and now I would play a4 to keep that pawn fixed where it is, keep the rook defending it, make that kind of another weakness for black. If you let black advance the pawn to a3, then that becomes possibly a strength for black, where you have to watch against counterplay where the rook comes down and counterattacks a2. So you do want some space in the endgame in the sense that it's important to know how quickly different pawns can queen. That on its own can be counterplay. Great move from white, tying black down to some passivity, and black plays a good move as well, just waiting. You can't do anything better than wait, so you wait. So now from white's perspective, you want to strengthen your king, your pawn majority, or your center passer. Perfect. That was on the list. Check, preparing a nice little bridge for the king on e4. Foos is asking, was rook a5 possibly better? No. I would say no. Passed a pawn is not the easiest to win with. This passed d pawn is quite nice. And most of all, this pawn is a weakness. So you're trading your opponent's weakness if you do this. What you see here is that with white's simple recapture, followed by a4, they've locked the black rook into passivity. This is worth almost a third pawn for white. 2 pawns plus this passivity. Not quite worth a third pawn, because obviously black could always just walk away and give it up. But white's advantage is more like 2.6 or something like that this way. Obviously, a computer would say plus 10 because it can see white queening already, Foos. But, you know, my old school computer evaluations from 20 years ago, they would give this like plus 2.6 because they'd say you're up 2 pawns, or 2.6, 2.7, you're up 2 pawns, and your rook's better, and your king's a little bit better. White improves the king. Black offers a rook trade. You can just snap that rook trade as white here. It doesn't get any easier than king and pawn endings. But okay, black gives the rook trade. And now the simplest method is usually to walk your king to the a pawn while their king is guarding your e pawn, except black's king heads towards the a pawns. Okay, well then we got to push this pawn. And if king b4, e7, king a4, e8. White gets a queen before black does. By 4 moves, so hopefully everybody can calculate that race comfortably. That's going to bring the black king back. And now you could go g5 or king d4. G6. Yeah, nice try from black. Trying to break up white's pawn structure over here. Takes. Yeah, that's fine. And now the king can walk this way. All right, you, Peter. Great to have some Rubinstein rook endgames in mind. Those will definitely guide you. Those will give you some instincts about what you want to do. Okay, so king and pawn endings 101, or 1, as I now prefer to call it. King and pawn endings 1. This thing here is called a protected passed pawn. And to me, it keeps the black king on a leash. If the king tries to do anything exciting, the pawn just goes and becomes a queen, which will win the game. The closer the pawn is to queen, the tighter the leash for the black king. In other words, here, the king's okay. It's within range of the pawn. It can still catch up. But if the king comes this way, then it's exceeded its leash. G7, king here, queen. Right? So to me, this pawn here is very close to queening. It keeps the black king on a very tight leash. This is the room that the opponent's king has, right? It's just all this little space here, right by the pawn. That means the white king can freely outmaneuver that king wherever it wants. Yeah, I mean, they make more sense to me, Foos. But it could be that they make more sense to humans, period, or it could be that they make more sense to us just because we spent time with them, right? It's how we learn, and it's what we're accustomed to. So could be one way or the other.
Gonna need to starfish at some point.
Okay.
Soon.
Good call.
Before 11:30. It's 11.
Okay. Which of us is going at 11:30? Do you think?
I think it's me because I have to then take Lily to Amelia's house.
Okay. So you want me to stop at 11:15 instead of 11:30 today?
Yeah, and then it's time to pay.
Okay.
Is it like 30?
Yeah, 30.
And it's downstairs in the. Okay.
Yep.
Alrighty. So white has done it. Queen the pawns, both of them. GG to Jimmy. All right. Folks, you may have overheard that we are going to have to stop commentary a little bit early today. The needs of the family. Another rook endgame. Yeah, this one looks good. This pawn looks very hard for white to stop right now. The king is sort of cut off by this structure. The rook could try going here and here. But instead it checks the king. Oh, and it gets to f5. Wait a minute. Shouldn't you put your king here? JK? So this rook can't come here? That's a little bit odd, isn't it? Letting the rook come behind your pawn and not making it work for it. Wait, hanging the pawn? JK, my friend. You've got 12.5 minutes. Deep, deep, deep into this endgame here. You don't need those 12 minutes for anything else but to finish off this endgame here, no? I mean, I guess g4, defending your pawn. And then you do the self-propelled thing like this. It's kind of slow. Looks like black doesn't even win, you know, because they have to come back and deal with this. So I'm not sure if black's winning here after king d4, rook f5, but oops. Now white could go rook f4 check and take this pawn. That was one simple option. To save the endgame. I don't think white can play to try to win the endgame because this pawn is so far from being a winner. The black king is closer to it than the white king. I think the most white can do is just check and draw. But, I mean, when your opponent plays moves that bad, it encourages you to start dreaming. I would definitely be dreaming. I mean, if my opponent played king d4 already and then allowing rook takes pawn, man, you can dream. You can dream. But okay, there was not much left there, and that game ends like that. Let's go to 1700. See who's leading this one. Leviathan Gaurav. 3 out of 3 today. Great run. And, oh yeah, and then there's MPK tied for first place. And MPK had thrown us a game with Baymon asking us for feedback on this King's Indian defense. So far, so good. All makes sense. Black counters white's center. White gives up the dark squared bishops. Now black has reason to be, you know, slightly happy about their position. Just keeps developing calmly. Okay, so white adds complications with e5. That's a nice try. I like it. But now they can't capture back on e5. It's still a pawn sack. And black's preparing to play moves like rook d8 and bishop f5 and get super active. Maybe this pawn sack wasn't good enough from Baymon. Maybe this e5 was not good enough. I mean, I like the spirit, right? We block in that bishop. We change the direction of the game a bit. But maybe Baymon should have just been developing these pieces. Maybe this is not that powerful. Because, you know, stuff like queen d2 and rook a d1 or rook a c1, those are moves that just, they have to get played at some point. There's kind of no way around it. Also, they might allow you to play b4 at some point, so black has to watch out for that. Right now, b4, bishop takes c3. Hanging our rooks and our knight won't be particularly good. But, like, let's say we develop the rook here. At some point, b4 is something that black has to respect, that it could kick the knight when it doesn't have d7, because the bishop needs to be here to let the rook out. Black wants to play bishop back to c8 and then have knight here, or black wants to play a5. If we send the knight over here and then play a3, see, I had to keep this knight defended first. This knight might not be well placed, so this could give white some chances. So, yeah, I guess white should have just continued developing here. Queen d2 or rook c1. They try this pawn sack, which is ambitious, but it just doesn't kind of work. So black got maybe too aggressive here with this move. Oh, no, okay. It was a mix of coordinating the pieces and being aggressive, but they mixed up the options. So MPK, I think this is maybe an instructive or useful moment for you. You could play this move here. Just say you're solid, white isn't doing much. You finish developing, you put your eye on this pawn, you prepare queen c5 or queen b4 going after this more, or rook e6, and you just kind of, you know, make sure that everything you have is coordinated and that this pawn is not a threat. And the less it's a threat, the more it's going to tend towards becoming a weakness. So that's one option. Or you can try to kill white on the dark squares using your extra pawn on the king side, right? And your extra dark square bishop. But if you're going to play e4, then you have to follow up with e4, right? What move does e4 want you to play next? It wants you to play something like bishop d4 or e3 or taking on b2. Those are the kind of moves that e4 wants you to do. If you now just say, oh, whoops, I should have developed all my pieces first and let them trade off your pawn, you're reducing your advantage in the game, right? So here, a good-looking move for you, e3. Pawn takes, rook takes, queen takes. King here, bishop e5, right? Or even bishop b2 first if you want. I don't know, maybe you can take another pawn over here, right? But bishop e5 going after this, now your pieces are good and their dark squares have become weak. So this is an aggressive option. You can also go for something like throwing queen b2 in this position here. After e4, e3, it's busted their king side a little bit and opened up this bishop. This is playable. Yep, I saw that, foos. Finally, even bishop d4 might be playable, like lining up for e3. It's the least obvious of the moves, but honestly, if your opponent takes like this, you do have bishop f2. Right, so you've weakened the king a little bit and just made some trades. This would definitely not be my first choice, but it's not terrible. So personally, I would, in a fast game, probably play rook d8 pretty quickly. In a classical game, I'd calculate e4, e3 for a while and probably end up playing e4, e3. So requires a little bit more calculation and precision, but it's probably pretty strong. That said, at the moment, it's kind of hard for your opponent to improve their position, right? Like you go rook d8, what are they playing? If they go knight d2, you just take, and it's pretty easy position. So okay, it gets a little bit mixed up here. We get some trades. You get back the extra pawn. There's some hope for white on the e file. And then they lost this pawn and resigned. Yeah, interesting. Fair enough. I mean, that's a good spot from black. Yeah, it's nice. Here you're going after g3 or b2. Still worked out well for black. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, Foos. I mean, the AIs just don't provide good feedback yet, but maybe one day they will, right? Maybe one day they will. All right. The professor of prophylaxis, probably playing another French defense here against MPK, who's one of the players tied for first place in this event. Let's just quickly see if it was a French. Nope, Sicilian. Okay, and now it's got a French structure. A6 probably unnecessary. All the moves up to this I really liked from black. Okay, so this nice maneuver bringing the knight towards c4 was going to be very powerful. Honestly, I think the bishop could still be on c8. It's not needed for this knight maneuver. But this is going to be very strong. White's pawns here getting kind of frozen because of the bishop's gaze. White keeps the knight out at the cost of a pawn sack and then sacks a piece. Fancy. Black takes it. Rook trade. In between move. White could take back with any of the three pieces here, actually. Black goes for the bishop, which is fine. And now you can retreat the knight or play king f7, which to me is maybe even the simpler move, but knight d7 makes sense as well, because then your queen doesn't have to sit there defending it anymore. Definitely don't want to play queen d7, queen b6, right? You just got to lay out your options and ask yourselves which allow white to take your stuff, right? Just a little bit of calm. And we will see that black is up a piece. So MPK has gone too aggressive and too violent here in this opening. Sacking first a pawn, then a piece very, very quickly on that piece sack. That was a 2-second move. Wow. And obviously, Prophylaxis has spent about 4 more minutes on the first 20 moves of this game than white has. And so far, getting all the calculations right. Folks, let me just announce, since I am leaving in a couple minutes, the arenas will continue. The arenas always go until 12:30. I set them to be 3 hours, so just a little bit more time and space for people to get their games in. I usually am able to do commentary until 11:30, and today I'm going to quit just a couple minutes early, or 15 minutes early. Just a request that I received here to make things smoother in the household. Okay, white trades off on f6. I agree. We should try and open up the position as white while black's got a few pieces that are just a little bit awkward, right? Like bishop a8 doesn't have any moves yet, and it's not really doing anything important. The knight can't move yet. So yeah, white should look to open up this e6 square or something for counterplay here. So I think ef6 is the best move, and then maybe rook e1 is an idea, or maybe bishop d6 might bother black a little bit. Oh, this move looks good too. The rook coming to c7. Yeah. That's a nice, annoying move. Very nice. Very nice. It's not even clear where the knight would go. Like if I castled, standard move, right? And then white attacks my knight, where does my stupid knight go? To b8? There are things I don't like about rook f7, but that's kind of an alternative, is rook f7 here. Oh, black's already made a move. Let's see what Professor came up with. Got castled. Okay. Castles was played pretty quickly. I would have had to slow down a little bit there because I don't know what to do about rook c7. I don't know if Professor has an easy idea for dealing with it, or if they just figured, it's okay, I'll find it when I get to it. But I find you have to be careful when you're up a piece, but your pieces are awkward. Sometimes it doesn't yet feel like you're up a piece. Sometimes you have to, like, even if technically the position is developed, sometimes you have to sort of rearrange all the pieces into a new coordination before we can feel that you have an extra piece. Rook c7, that was the idea. MPK putting on some pressure. Prophylaxis. Got to choose between, I guess, rook f7 and knight b8. I don't see other moves. There might be other moves. There's bishop takes d4 check, which I think looks awful, but I can understand the idea. There's also e5. Rook takes d7. That's messed up. I don't really believe in it, but this could be a weird option. So I think white, the rook is, we're breaking the coordination on the rook, right? So white would really want to play an in-between move. Then I would go here for black, I think is the idea. And after pawn takes, bishop c6. Winning the rook. But I did lose a knight, and my bishop's also hanging. So I don't know how amazing this is. What might white do? Here, here, here. Oh, white's chances have improved dramatically here, right? Now we're down an exchange instead of a piece. And we have a pawn, so it's an exchange and a pawn. The bishop remains kind of bad. I want to put bishops or knights on d4 for white. I could see this being a very tricky position to play. So I do not recommend e5 based on that line. I think I prefer knight b8 the most of the moves I've considered so far. Knight b8. All right, and that's all my time, folks. I guess we'll have to wait to see what happens. Rook f7 was played. I'm going to give you a link to the game for anyone who wants to watch the denouement of this interesting position here. And for those of you playing, thank you for the games that we got to watch. Hope you have enjoyed the games you've played so far and enjoy the games that you will be playing in the next hour or so.